I put the big ass LEDs up there. Yeah, I need to quit looking at them because now all I see is spots in front of you guys. It'd be nice if they were regular lights and it'd warm it up a bit in here. Yeah. Yeah. I would have. I would have had them running the furnaces back here, even if it would be noisy. It's that cold still. We're good? So we're live?
You're live.
So I shouldn't say any naughty things? Alright, we'll get started then. My name's Gary. One time I was one of the owners of this place, but I said I've had enough and I retired. Hadn't been able to work on my own layout for a couple of years, but now I can work on my own layout again because I got time. But anyway, I'm going to go over the way that I like doing rocks on layouts. It's one of many ways to do it. I find it works best for me. So we're going to cover several things. We're actually going to take this behind me and move it forward. I've got it prepped so we can do some painting of the rocks. It's all dried up on part of it. But some of the tools you'll need when you do this, you'll need a wide variety of paintbrushes, some terrain liquid pigments. These are very good. You can use them like a paint to put on stuff. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be watering them way, way, way down and getting the rocks colored more like a stain so it soaks into them instead of just sitting on the top. We'll use the what's called the zebra coat method. Take basically 3 different colors and you just dab it in and then you just kind of blend it together. So that's what works for me. Other things you're going to need is water, a mixing bowl, hydrocal plaster to do the rocks, something like Sculpt-A-Mold is what I use to fasten the rocks to the layout. And the reason I do that is I can put a layer of Sculpt-A-Mold on there, press the rocks into it. People will say, well, how do you fill in the spot in between the rocks? Don't have to. I press it in the Sculpt-A-Mold, it comes out, and then I take a brush or the end of a brush and take out the part that I don't want in there to make it all blend together. And I don't have to try to get a turkey baster or a hypodermic needle and squirt plaster to it in there. So that, the hydrocal, wet water. Everybody know what wet water is? Everybody says, yeah, it's water. Water's wet. Simple water with some dish soap in it. It helps break the tension and allows things to soak in. You'll also need rock molds. You can put plaster on there and carve out your rocks if you want to. I'm not that artistic, so I look for something a little easier to do. I use a bin of got nothing but sand in it, and the reason I do that is it will give me something heavy to lug around. But it forms a solid base. I can push my molds down in, then I don't have to worry about them tipping and whatnot. I can get them fairly level, so then all I have to do is pour the plaster into it. Once you get them poured, it usually takes a couple hours for them to set up. It'll take 12 to 24 hours for them to completely set up, but you can get them out of the mold in a couple hours, and they'll come out looking something like this. Various different sizes, but you can see it's got the details in it. Sorry, I'm going off camera. Pass that around, take a look. Feels kind of chalky still. because it's been about 24 hours because I made those last night. Have any of you worked with hydrocal plaster before? What you'll want to do is when you mix it up, don't mix up too much at once. You can always mix up more and pour it in there, but if you mix up too much, you're just going to be throwing it away. But you want it to be basically the consistency of like a pancake batter. That way it'll pour nice and easy into the molds. Before you do any pouring into the molds, you want to take your wet water and spray down all the molds, which will help release the plaster when you're ready to take it out. So that's all wetted down. I'll set it back over here. I'll grab my mixing cup, and you'll need a stirring stick. Just anything laying around is what I end up doing. In this case, I got a piece of plywood that's cut off of something. Open up our plaster. Now some people will actually take some of the pigments and mix it in with the plaster so you get a solid color all the way through. I don't think it's necessary because when you water it down enough, like I say, it'll form more of a stain and soak into it. The reason they do that on a lot of things, I'll do it when I'm pouring roads. That way if it gets a little chip on it or something, I don't have a glaring white spot in there. It'll be solid gray or black or whatever I'm dealing with at the time. There's many forms of hydrocal plaster you can get. Woodland Scenics does the lightweight hydrocal plaster, which is what most people will be familiar with. Back in the building trades, they use a regular hydrocal plaster. It's not lightweight, and you can get it in like 25 and 50 pound bags. So if you're doing a big layout, you might want to look around and see if you can find one of those. I did that when I started my layout like 3 or 4 versions ago of my layout. And I've still got about a fourth of a 5-gallon bucket of it laying around. So anyway, we'll take the plaster, pour some water into it. My magical stirring stick. A little more plaster if you can. Some people think I'm, well, some of your true artists, purists of the model railroad industry will probably say, well, he's cheating, he's using molds, he ain't using hand carving. And I admit, I'm an artist. I'll take any shortcut I can get as long as it comes out looking like the results I want. So like I said, about the thickness, consistency of a pancake batter, and then all I'm going to do, gotta get this one a little more level, is just fill up the molds. And one thing about the molds, if you're doing the deeper rocks like on this end, but you don't want per se a deep rock, you don't have to fill them all the way up. You can just basically fill them up to the depth where you want that thickness. Now what I'm doing, since we're doing a bluff wall, is I prefer the thinner ones. So in this case they don't protrude out into the river more than I want them to. And if it doesn't all go in the mold and it just pours all over the place, that's fine too, because we can find out later after this stuff hardens. I'll show you how to clean them up. Don't know if I quite got enough to fill up all the molds, but anyway, if you take that one piece that I passed around to y'all, even at this stage where it's thin, it'll break fairly easy, and that's all you really have to do when you're trimming it up. You want to try to get it not overly bulging out. Try to keep the back as flat as possible. Well, I did have some left. Hallelujah. So then you've got all these sitting here in the mold, and you say, okay, what am I going to do for 2 hours? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do for 2 hours. First thing we're going to do is set this off to the side. Set a bunch of this off to the side. And this is where Katie's going to have to come grab the mic while I move some tables around and bring the layout up into the frame for the pictures.
You're going to have to go that way because I have to stay this direction. Only because it's really lightweight.
This weighs nothing. I mean, it's all foam. It's all, yeah.
I didn't know you were actually, but then once I grabbed it, I was like, oh, I can do this.
This is a display we're making. It's made out of Woodland Scenics in scale, one of their structural scenery kits. It's got all the parts in it. It's got the different pieces of board, styrofoam, risers, plaster cloth, more styrofoam underneath it, paper underneath it. But it's never going to be all finished because we want people to come up and say, okay, how do we use this? Well, this is how you do it. You lay this in here, you lay this in here, you plaster. It'll have all the stages in it. This side is our mountainside, hillside, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be our town side. Looks like we have to do some sanding on it, but this is what we're going to be putting rocks on. We got a river that runs down through here, which I might change slightly in the future. And this is the rocks that I put in place early afternoon. And they're all pretty solid. This is something somebody else did that I ain't happy with. That's not me. I didn't do that. But I mean, if you want, I mean, it all looks white now. If you want to come up and take a look at it, you can see. But what we're going to do is start filling on in down here. Then once we get this all set, and while it dries, we're going to come in and paint this section since it's already dry. So what we do, once you use my rocks, is we're going to take these rocks that like I said I made earlier. We're just going to kind of piece them in place to get a look of how they look. Whether I want to turn it this way or maybe I want to turn it this way. And just kind of lay them in place. It's probably not too big. And once you get happy with the way it's looking, and if you need to change something to make it fit a little bit better, if they turn around and whatnot, it's relatively easy. It's a little bit too big. Just snap a piece of it off. Okay, so once we start getting stuff in place, I'm going to move this out of the way. mix up the sculpting mold. Because like I said, the sculpting mold is going to be used as an adhesive and our filler on the wall.
Do you have enough water, Gary? Do you have enough water?
I got plenty of water.
Okay.
And we get it out, the sculpting mold, anybody work with sculpting mold before? What it is, it's a combination of shredded paper and plaster. It's kind of like a paper mache. It's clumpy, so you don't want to just turn the bag upside down and you're liable to have the bag in your cup. You have to be way more than that. One other thing I should have said you needed, working with plaster, is some gloves. Gloves definitely come in handy. Especially if you're wearing a wedding ring and if your wife's all full of plaster, you'd be in real trouble. I've got boxes like this of gloves laying all over, at least 2 at the house. Up here there's 2 or 3 or 4.
Did you call me?
Best place I've found, basically they're disposable, you can use them for a little bit and then you throw them away, is Harbor Freight. They usually got them at a pretty decent price. So now, where am I putting my water? I'm going to take and mix this up. And this is where it comes fun. If you got little kids, they'd probably love to help you do this. Gloves for this is it's kind of messy. Get this all stirred up. About the consistency of oatmeal. And then what I'm going to do, it's real technical. You got to use specific tools for it. Reach my hand in there and grab some and just spread it on the wall. It might be a little runny, but I think it will still work. And this stuff does set up fairly quick. So a little bit runny in the beginning is not too bad. If you make it too thick, you're really going to be busting to get stuff on in time to make it not dry. But you want a 1/4 inch thick or so, depending on your rocks, so you can afford them to fill in. But then you're just going to take your rocks. It's got the nice, relatively smooth on one side, and you're just going to put it up here and push it into that plaster. And that's going to fill all those seams in there. And you can go around and smooth the excess out as you're going. I don't know exactly what order we had those in, but I obviously didn't go far enough with my good stuff.
What's your working time on that, Gary? How long do you have before?
It depends on how thick you make it.
Okay.
This right here, I've probably got 15 minutes. And I probably got a little bit longer. It's just going to be more difficult to get it pushed through where I want it to be pushed through and to keep it smoothed out. Like I say, you just go on down through here, pressing that all out. And you can see I'll go back and fill in some of the little air gaps. Make it look like more one consistent piece. And I'm sorry if I'm standing in everybody's way, but I have a hard time doing this backwards. plaster, but it'll do. Okay, so you want to come up and take a look as we kind of flare this out a little bit, filling in some of the gaps.
You guys wanna go up and look at
Feel free. I'm just going to sit here and play in my Play-Doh. Anyway, for the most part, you can see, hardly see any of the joints. So it's and if there's areas where it needs a little bit, I can take a flat blade or my fingers and just fill in a little more plaster. How long we've been working on it? But this is starting to set up. It's still pliable, but it's starting to set up.
Did you add a little more water to it now, or no?
You can with mixed results. Sometimes I've had it where it'll do it, other times it just basically becomes clumpy and unusable.
So mix as you go, don't mix up a half gallon of it. and then-
Oh God, no. I'm gonna have a bunch left over in here. And you want to kind of get around and down where you can look at this from straight on, because you'd be surprised at how many little gaps hide on you until you do that. Now, one thing you can do, which I'll tell you, you can do this with any plaster. Once you get it on, it's a little rougher than you want. Just get some water on your fingers and then just rub it over the rough spots, and it'll pretty well smooth it out. So anyway, we now have the rocks we're going to deal with in place. Yeah, there's more work that needs done on this end, but eventually I got to expand that on out anyway. Like I say, look at it from multiple angles, multiple elevations, because I guarantee you it'll hide on you. And just when you're bragging about your rock, somebody will say, well, what did you do here? You don't have any nitpickers at your stuff, do you? And some of this, when I'm doing something on the bottom layer on a river, I will leave the rocks where they will have an undercut into them, because that's basically what water does. It'll undercut everything. And then you'll have stuff break off and fall down. And I have been known in the past for some of the holes that I'm filling in, take a little bit more plaster than I care for. And after it dries, I'll take a wire brush to it to get some texture into the plaster so it's not as smooth. So anybody got any questions on this part? It's all pretty straightforward, and I find it a lot simpler than gluing them in place and trying to fill everything in, or carving them, just put a bunch of plaster out and carve them. To me, that doesn't work very well. For one, I'll get extremely frustrated, next thing you know, I'll be throwing it in the trash.
Will you hold up the box of what you're using?
Which box? I'm not using anything out of a box.
Right,
I'm
or
using-
whatever you're using.
A bag of Sculptamold. We've got all kinds of it that comes in. I think this is a 5 pound, no,
Wait.
3 pound.
Okay, go get it.
Sculptamold, it's a 3 pound bag. You can also get it in a larger box, it's like 25 pounds or something like that. 3 pounds will go a long way. Get rid of the gloves. Because now what we're going to do is play with all the plaster all over my hands before I put my gloves on. I am going to take, I said we're going to do zebra, but I'm going to, instead of doing 3, still can't get 4 counted out. Had 7, I took it down, I had 6, took it down, and I had, came out here, thought I had 4, and I had 3. So the main colors we're going to use, and this is something else you want to do, depending on your area you're modeling, look at some pictures of rock cuts. Because you want to try to match that color. Some places it'll be dark gray, some places it'll be light gray, some places it'll have a yellowish tint to it. So just take a look at that, and you can probably come close to duplicating it. Me, I'm going to use yellow ochre, I'm going to use concrete, and I'm going to use stone gray as my 3 for that. And then I've got a black over here that I am going to do some highlights with into the crevices and the cracks and underneath stuff. These are brand new bottles, so they probably got a piece of foam in them. Yeah. How the heck am I going to get that out of there? Always have a knife handy. No matter what you're doing on model trains, if you don't have a knife, you're going to need one. Just about guaranteed. Now when I do this, I like starting with the lighter colors first. And the predominant colors first. There's some products, like, yes, this is a Woodland Scenics display we're doing. Sculptamold is not Woodland Scenics, but Woodland Scenics doesn't really have anything like it. So I prefer the Sculptamold, so that's what I'm going to use. Just like somebody complains about the train layout, they don't like this, they don't like that. What's your standard answer? It's my railroad. I don't care if I got a 484 locomotive running with a brand new ES whatever. It's my railroad and that's what I like. So we're going to water this stuff down pretty thin, so it don't take a whole lot of the paint to get to the consistency that I want. And yes, I could use a pipette to make exact measurements and everything, but this stuff is just like my cooking. I do it by feel and what it looks best for me. Now some of the areas you're going to want to try to get into with a smaller brush. But for the most part, a cheap brush works just fine. All we're going to do is spot it. And I don't care if they mix together because they're all going to be mixed together eventually anyway. these so I can actually see what I'm doing. But there's no wrong way to do this. I mean, if you don't like the way it's coming out, just go back over it with something darker. Just kind of blend them together. Pour shit all over the table.
Can you mix alcohol with it?
You could. Don't really make a whole lot of difference. Katie, bring the diorama from the front desk up. It's a little more yellow than I'd like it to be, but it's getting there. I don't think I opened that bottle yet. You just play with this, like I said, till you get what you think it looks like. And with a little practice, you can get pretty close. If you ever get this stupid bottles opened. Back before COVID, when I did this class, we actually made that module. There's 3 of them in the class, so they were all given a section. Once we got the rocks put in place, everything we each took a section, 3 of them did the paint. And yeah, it took like 3 different paints. It don't take much just to blend it back together. Came up fairly well. A little rock will come through here when we do the dry creek bed. This black is going to be used to highlight it. It's also going to darken up some of these areas I'm crazy about at this point. I'll make that one just a little less watered. And you can see as you touch and just let it run down, it kind of goes in and fills in the crevices. I'm not an artist. Darken up this yellow a little bit. Alright, so we're going to go with the coal areas and make it a darker gray color. But that's basically all there is to it. I mean, you've got some characteristics in there. You've got some areas where the dark has flowed down through the cracks. Sometimes I will, if it's a bigger area, take a spray bottle with either watered down black or actually watered down India ink and spray it down, and it gets through the cracks also. Come up, take a look at it, see what you think. There, come on.
You move it for a minute.
Black with a huge difference.
Yes. Now you might take the ochre, which is pretty yellowish color. You might mix it with white. little bit down. Just depending on, once again, where you're wanting to model from. Now, the other thing you do with the rocks, once you get them made, you can take them, say, up on some flat ground or up in here. Say you got a rock protruding out, you just attach it up there the same way. You stain it, you put your other ground cover on there, you plant a few trees around it or shrubs or whatever. Or you can just do a single outcropping. Like maybe there's something that sticks out here. You have another big piece right. Maybe I can use this one. I just had some rock that stuck out there. Everything else is washed away from it. So a number of things you can do once you get the rocks made. Just use your imagination, play with it until it looks good. If you got a few flaws, like up in here, where your ground form's gonna cover a whole lot of that when you put that on. Or your bushes or your trees or now. My own thing, they make another product called Shaper Sheet. It will actually support itself because it's a kind of like a felt with a foil backing on it. So you can shape it in any way you want it. I don't care for it. Because yep, it goes on, you can shape it, you get a nice look at it, but when you go to put a tree on it, you just about have to drill your holes, and all that felt type stuff does is wrap around the bit. And it makes it very difficult to proceed on from there. So I'm going to stick with my plaster cloth.
If you're building a modular layout like T-track, is there a good way to blend the path, plaster, and landscape somewhere between them, or you always have to see that line?
With the T-track stuff, it's inevitable. You're going to see a line for most cases. Some people will actually take one of the modules and have it protrude, the landscape will protrude, the plaster protrude just a little bit, so it actually overlaps and you still going to see a line, but not a gap. So this, like I said, we had other things you can do to it. We have a little culvert here, we got Berry Creek bed going down, drains here, this comes out over there, goes down to Berry Creek. Now this rock face here, this is just sculptable. Put it on the same way I did there. Took my hand, plastered it on there, it looked pretty good, and I treated it the same way with the stamps. If you look, obviously a bigger one, if you go to the in-scale layout on this side, that whole, there's a few rocks in it, and for the most part, that whole bluff is done just the same. So, that's pretty much it. I mean, I thought I was having that problem to get it all in. We are going to take these out of the mold. It feels like they're firming up pretty well. When you go to take them out of the mold, I always do it over my sand. You see all the time little pieces, and sometimes the rock breaks. I'll fish them out of this. That little rock.
You only got 45 minutes on that, Gary.
You know what?
You pretty good?
Looks like I could probably get them out. I'll try it one and see. What you want to do is you kind of bend it, push it up from the bottom. You can see that there's a little bit of flange, if you will, in parts of it. Just you have to, like, sit up completely, it's a lot easier, just break off right in your hand. And then start putting these back in my collection. Take out a few more from the, just a little bit more there. Good, huh? Take off the flange piece. It comes with the molds, as long as you keep your molds clean, you can see a lot of the details of the rocks. Which is a lot better than I can ever do carving. So look and say, oh, it's cracking, it's cracking. It cracks. And a lot of times, just because of the plaster overflow in different areas. Like this up through here, that's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 rocks. So it's got a lot of overflow in it. These are longer, some of these deeper ones. You might need to just go very carefully breaking loose from the edges, pushing it a little from the bottom. You can get it broken free. Just grab it and work it out. Still see it feels wet. And Woodland Scenics has a number of these molds for different things. It's just a big sheet to make a difference if you're doing HO scale, or N scale, or Z scale, or O scale. And obviously with the bigger ones for the O scale stuff. Like I said, if you're doing rock work like this, I prefer the thin stuff. This is N-gauge to start with, in scale, excuse me. And it just protrudes too much if I get bigger pieces. Once you get everything out of the mold, wash the mold off and wash it in. Take some salt on it. And you'll be good to go for the next round. Now, anybody got any questions on any of this?
On the painting you did, if you just saw a spot on there you didn't like,
Yep.
how would you go back through? Would you start out with a light over the dark again and start
The
over?
problem with going with the light back, that's why I like starting with the light and then try to go darker as I go. Once it's on there, it's not coming off. You have an area line, oh, it's too dark, I want to do white. Yeah, you can do it, but you're gonna have to mix this stuff a lot thicker, so it goes on more like a paint, and you're gonna start losing some of the details. So always start with your light first, and then fill in with the dark as you need.
How well does airbrushing work with the plaster?
It doesn't, not for this type of stuff, because you'll want to use spots basically, and then just come back with one of the colors or a blend of the colors and kind of just blend it all together and tie it in. And one thing to remember is areas, you won't have it much here because you'd have the water here, you'd have it a little bit back under here where it's underneath, so that's going to be a little bit darker than it is on top. So you just work with it that way. And if you keep the paints, terrain, whatever they call them, pigments, liquid pigments, keep them thinned down enough and just dab on there, they'll follow right down all the lines and they'll highlight. So I use that part for last because it's the cracks and stuff that I want to be done. Any other questions? Anybody think this is worthwhile?
Thank you. Very informative, thank you. You made it look a whole lot easier than I thought it was.
It surprised me when I first started getting into it, but my favorite part of model railroad is the scenery now. So I've played with it a little bit more and whatnot. It's not something to be as scared of as you initially think. Today, there's so many things on YouTube, so many places that do clinics like this, so many books on it. Just get your sources. You can find all kinds of stuff out there, and just always study before you actually try to do it. Get yourself a couple of pieces of small pink foam from Home Depot or something. Practice, try it, see what you like, see what you don't like. If you got any questions, people will be around. I'm retired, so I'm not here all the time anymore. But people can answer your questions. or you can send me an email. Email simple, it's GATWELL 478 at att.net. Or you can leave word with one of the guys here and they'll get hold of me. I'll call you, or text you, or whatever your preferred method is. So, that's pretty much all I've got. Somebody want to try something up here, or any more questions, or?
Thank you.
Thank you
Like I
very
said,
much.
my email, I'm Gary, my email address is GATWELL, G-Atwell, 478 at att.net. If you've got any questions here or out there, you can just drop me an email and I will try to get back to you. Thank you all for coming, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
A lot bigger turnout than I had at my last clinic, like I said, I only had 3 people. It's always something to play with.
That looks good.
Just spared it.
Yep.
So when you get done, did you wet your
When I first started, I did just like I did there. I grabbed the handful and put it on there.
Right.
Then that's it. I just kind of patted it. It was a wet hand. It was wet right hand. So kind of
Much
like
smaller.
texture out of it. If there was areas that too much texture. Yeah, start back the camera and look a little more towards it. So yeah, you can see rocks sticking out of the ground in places. So yeah, it's actual rocky area.
I've had some molds for 15 years. It's got a staple to it. There's a bit of break to it.
Yep.
Now?
Now, if you want your molds, one thing I didn't say, if you want your rock molds, actual rocks to be sturdier per se, that they don't break as easy, just take a piece of cheesecloth, pour a little bit of mold plaster in there, put the cheesecloth in, and you finish pouring it, and the cheesecloth will look together better. I don't per se need it because I pretty much get them done, get them on the layout, and it's got the sculpting mold behind it, which stiffens it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It was
Oh,
very
you're very welcome.
informative.
And eventually, I will be going on, I'm sure there'll be another clinic so we can do static grass, we can do ground foam, we can do, I already did a clinic here a while back on making trees, we did puffball trees, and what other type of tree, I don't remember which one it was trying to find it. I'm sure it was a woodland scenics one. And,
Hey.
got those.
Do it again.
Want to go to YouTube and watch it?
Easier to play.
That's stuff I gotta do. I gotta trip tomorrow.
You had to.
Just, it's not a long trip, but it's like 8 people.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you want to look at the in-scale layout of it,